welcome back to the class, everyone. We officially have word Galactic Legend Leia is coming to the game here soon. And with that, we got her first set of hefty Galactic Legend requirements. So what I want to do today is talk about what the rest could be. This is always kind of a fun video to make right after we get the big character announced, to kind of look and see what we think could be a requirement. I wouldn't exactly advise just going and relicking everything up right now based off these recommendations. I mean, unless you really want to, because things are subject to change. In reality, I don't have any insider info. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first off, we have the requirements that have already been confirmed. This is insider info. Rex, Wicket, Lando, Admiral Akbar, as well as Princess Nisa are all confirmed, so we don't really have to talk about them. And typically, Galactic Legends have roughly 15 requirements if you're not also including the requirements for like a middle legendary character like Jedi Knight Luke. And these are just some of the things that I think that they could really take advantage of. Number one, characters that have a type of affinity towards Leia, but also a lot of people just don't have geared or relicked, and would be a great monetization opportunity for our lovely developers to take advantage to get all these people to gear up, whether it be spending or free to play or whatever, getting the characters up and Galactic Legend ready. So the next batch, and I'm not sure these will come in these exact batches, but what I'm guessing will be the next one is we're going to finally get we're going to get the confirmation that there's going to be a Leia involved. And the reason why I think this is because if we look back, for all 6 of the first Galactic Legends who had a previous version of themselves, a previous version was required in the requirements. JTR was required for Rey, Crew was required for SLKR, Jedi Knight Luke was required for Jedi Master Luke, Sidious was required for Emperor Palpatine, or for Sith Eternal, as well as Gas and GK for Obi-Wan and Lord Vader. Typically in the event, they'll actually take on the skin of the Galactic Legend, and they'll go from there. Jabba didn't have one, but, you know, Jabba doesn't have an earlier version, at least that I know of. So, I think Rolo is the perfect fit for that. It's really the only Leia we have in game. I guess they could do Boushh before that, now that I think of it, but it would make more sense to have one of the light side ones geared towards her, especially since Boushh is already required at a higher relic level for Jabba. I think they could take advantage of the fact that most people only have Rolo at Relic 3 due to her being needed as a requirement for Jedi Knight Luke. And with relic levels being the real crunch right now, this makes the most sense to me to have her in there. Next up is going to be Chief Chirpa. I don't think we've seen the last of the Ewok requirements when it comes to Galactic Legend Leia. She obviously has Wicket in the first one, Anissa as well, and those two make the most sense because Wicket obviously has a very strong relationship with her in Return of the Jedi, with their interactions there, but it makes sense that she would also have 1 or 2 more later on, and kind of the more generic picks of characters that she would have had interactions with would be Chief Chirpa, being the chief of the tribe that our friends were accepted into in Return of the Jedi. Stormtrooper Han. Also, there pretty much just has to be a Han included here, at least one that's going to be needed for the event to be able to do it. And while Raid Han by far makes the most sense because that's really the outfit, or at least the closest outfit he's wearing when the event comes around. That being said, he's already required for 2 other Galactic Legends, and I know they do double dip every now and then, but having one that would be needed for 3 total, that seems to be a bit of a stretch. I mean, I guess they could do it, but I would expect Stormtrooper Han, just because he hasn't really been required for anything else. And he does have a usable place in the game with Sana Staros. They make a pretty good team, both in 3v3 and in 5v5, just with how she's set up to work with our Rebel Scoundrel tanks. So I'm guessing he will be in there at some point, maybe at a lower relic level, like Relic 5 or something like that. But I feel like it'd be really awkward to have a Leia and not have a Han for obvious reasons. Next up is going to be Saw Gerrera. This one I've been thinking about really ever since he came out, even before Galactic Legend Leia was confirmed. Maybe we just start calling her Leia. That's a bit of a mouthful. Before Leia was confirmed, we got Saw, and he's only required at Gear 12 for Cal Kestis. And I realize that is a feat for many, including myself, as you can probably tell from my 37 out of 65 shards. But at the same time, similar to the argument before with Rolo, this is the perfect opportunity for everyone to have to push him already into relics. And it's not terribly terrible for the player either, because then we get to use him in the mission on Kashyyyk to be able to get some extra get to, which is always nice. I guess we will need to bring up the rest of the rebel fighters that are needed for that mission, but at the same time, it's nice when they get us halfway there, and that's really probably how they make money, or really how they entertain us in a way of giving us half the puzzle, not for free, but on a way to get something else, and then kind of pushing us into the rest of it. He was also a pretty high up rebel. Him and Leia, I'm not sure if they had a lot of interaction, but at the same time, that's not really a prerequisite for being a requirement. We see Mon Mothma as a requirement for Luke, and they didn't exactly have the strongest of bonds either. It'd probably be a very similar comparison. So that is going to, oh, and as well for the 5th requirement, I'm just going to guess this is Captain Drogon. He was mentioned in the road ahead as the a captain that was on Endor. I don't really know how I feel about it. I'm not going to sit here and cry a river about, like, they have to stop making characters or anything like that. But at the same time, there had to have been, like, another rebel that synergizes with Leia. I probably wouldn't even hated a 6th version of Han coming in, like an Endor Han or something. It seems... I'm not really against them making characters. I thought GBA and Sortie were very good kits, and honestly kind of cool characters in general. But it just seemed a little bit pointless to make up a character for the Rebel faction that is so huge, and for so many characters that we could have had. But anyways, on to the 3rd and final batch, and you see there are 4 characters here, and we'll get to the 5th slot at the very end of this. But Ewok Elder, kind of along the same exact lines as Chief Trooper. I do think there will be more Ewoks. They're not really going to have another opportunity to have us gear them up, at least as far as requirements go. I think this is it. Different from, say, Bounty Hunters, where they were able to pass it out between 3 or 4 different Galactic Legends to be able to get everyone to essentially relic every single Bounty Hunter except Dad Bod Boba. I guess Mando isn't really needed at relics, but he is required for BAM. Anyways, so I think that they're still going to take advantage of that, and Ewok Elder just kind of makes sense. I am curious, though, for the player, if what position Nisa is going to take in the Ewok team, because from what my Ewok fanatic friends tell me, Ewok Elder is kind of the weak link. His revive is really nice, but if you start to compare it to most endgame revives like Vandor or Daka, it is incredibly outdated. You get one, the character comes back, and if they die again, you're done. Like, you cannot recover it. It's so little it's too little too late, essentially. So I wonder if he's actually the one that ends up getting replaced, because Poplar has a really nice job as a tank. Wicket's a decent damage dealer. Chirper does have the lead. I guess maybe she could be lead. Anyways, I'm guessing we'll see another Ewok. And Farm Boy Luke for pretty much the exact same reason as Stormtrooper Han. I do think they're going to take advantage of this to finally get people to relic Farm Boy Luke. He's also, if he does make it into the requirements, he will essentially take the place of the, sorry buddy, but full out loser. Every Galactic Legend has 1 or 2 that just doesn't really do anything at all. Everyone has their Krennic, everyone has their Resistance pilot or whatever it is that just doesn't do a whole lot, and is essentially just a requirement for the sake of being a requirement. I mean, it is Leia's brother, spoiler alert for that one, but still, at the same time, they have to, I feel like they have to do one variation of Luke, and all the others are kind of required. I guess they could do Jedi Knight Luke for a 3rd time, but it's again kind of the same rationale behind Han. 3 seems like a lot. Seems to be a bit of a crowd. Wedge Antilles, they have already kind of hinted at the fact that they're looking at the Rebel fleet by including Admiral Akbar, so I think Wedge Antilles as another addition will be really cool. As well, him being needed at Relic 3 already for Jedi Master Luke seems like a pretty clear-cut opportunity to just make him required at, say, R7 for Leia. That, especially because when you start to look at Tarkin, that's pretty much the exact same thing they did with him. They required him at Relic 3 to go after Sith Eternal, and then when you had eventually make the push for Lord Vader, he was required at Relic 7. He's also kind of in the fleet, so makes sense that crossover there. It was a pretty important part of the Rebel fleet, and hopefully maybe a first look at us getting a nice look at the new Rebel fleet, maybe with Red Squadron. That's completely made up. I have no idea if that's actually going to be a thing, but it would be cool to see, and it's fun to play around with. And last but not least, we have R2. I realized that R2 is a requirement already for Jedi Master Luke, so this would essentially be the freebie. I feel like every Galactic Legend, there's at least 1 or 2 freebies sitting in there, where it's a character that everyone probably already has at high relics. Grievous with JMK was a pretty good example of that, as well as Vader with Emperor or Sith Eternal. Lord Vader had gas. There always seems to be 1 or 2 characters sitting at the top that most of us will already have, whether because they're just really stinking good or because they're already a requirement for an existing Galactic Legend. And when R2 and Leia just seem to have such a strong connection. I mean, that's pretty much the first scene in Star Wars, or one of the first scenes in Star Wars, was R2, or rather her passing the data planes onto R2 for him to go hide them, for them to eventually be able to blow up the Death Star. So it seems like a pretty important part of her story. And again, he's only currently required for 1 other thing, unless you're counting CLS, which at that point is not relics. And then the very last piece that I think they're going to do, and they don't have to do this, it's not a rule or anything, but if we go into the journey guide and we look at every single other one of the Galactic Legends, there is one pretty prevailing theme. And I know, again, like CG isn't trapped in this, they don't have to always do this, but if, again, we look at Jabba, he has one ship there. He has the Outrider, even though I'm pretty sure he has absolutely no connection at all with the Outrider. Maybe someone can explain that lore to me. Lord Vader has the Y-Wing. Also, really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. At least I'm pretty sure he does. Where is it here? Oh, yeah. BLT. Or BTL. Yeah, that's right. Sith Eternal ends up having, I believe, what is it? Palp Shuttle or something like that. I think we're just going to go ahead and take my word. Oh, Imperial TIE Bomber. They all have at least one ship involved. And right now, there is one really awkward Rebel ship sitting out there that doesn't really make that much of a difference as far as PvP or PvE goes, and also isn't required for anything, that would just be the perfect match for this, even though there's really no correlation, very similar to the Outrider. And that is, let me see if I can find it, Raven's Claw. This would be, fun is probably not the right word, but this is a fun way for CG to blind all the people that essentially completely dipped out on this, because quite frankly, it's just not that good. It doesn't do a whole lot. I realize there's some type of split that requires you to pull Han and Chewbacca from the Profundity Fleet, but I guess offensively that can work. Defensively, I'm really not a fan of that because it opens up other counters. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people have just neglected this because they're focusing on gear or something else. So that would be a really good way for CG to get that one in there and finally force people to farm that final one up. But yeah, those are my guesses, our speculation for Galactic Legend Leia, are probably just known now as Leia. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who else might get included? And until the next time, stay awesome.